Hello Year 11 and welcome to your last lesson in this half term. Well done for producing so much fantastic high quality work since Christmas. This unit has been quite challenging. It's quite challenging at the best of times, so well done for producing the practice exam questions to the best of your ability. As you know, we've been looking at the UK's evolving human landscape this half term, and we've been looking at the differences between urban and rural areas and the ways in which urban and rural areas can be managed sustainably too, to improve the quality of life of people living there. The first thing I'd like you to do is work through this PLC. So this is everything you should know for the UK's evolving human landscape, and you will be being assessed properly on this unit when we return to school. So please do make sure you go through and you say whether or not you think you are confident, so that would be a tick in the green box, whether you feel okay about some of these elements of the course or whether you do not feel happy at all. So I would like you to spend some time now reading through. If you can obviously print these off. If not, you can just make a note of any of the elements of this specification that you definitely are struggling with. This information is then really useful to pass on to me in the work that you submit, so I can look at the areas that we should be going over. So again, making sure that you go through and just make sure you're really honest with yourself. There's no right or wrong here. It doesn't matter if you tick all red. That just means that we have to make sure we are going over all of this information. And then this part of the specification is related to London. So everything that we've been doing in lockdown really has been linked to what's happening in London and London's interdependence with areas like Turling, the rural areas that are experiencing different challenges and opportunities too. Okay, so this week I have set you 2 8-mark practice exam questions to complete, and these are focusing on topics that I would like us to revisit just in a little bit more detail, maybe because the topic itself is quite complex and complicated, or because I don't feel like we have gone over this topic enough in lesson. Your first practice exam question this week is evaluate the success of strategies aimed at making urban living more sustainable. So I don't think this question reads very nicely at all, but if we bug the question and dissect it together now, hopefully you'll realise that you are more than capable and have the knowledge that you need to answer it. So to start, we will bug the command word. This is an evaluate question. I always think that evaluate questions are slightly easier to answer than assess questions because you know that you have to give a conclusion at the end. In order to get your full marks in this question, I would like you to explain 3 strategies used in London for your AO2 marks. I would then like you to try and evaluate the success of each of these strategies and then come to an overall conclusion. So the reason why you wouldn't talk about 4 strategies is because of that conclusion at the end would help you get those last 2 marks. So evaluate 3 strategies that have been used in London to make urban living more sustainable. So when we're talking about urban living and sustainability, remember sustainability is reducing the impact we have on future generations while still meeting our own needs. But also when we're talking about urban living, we're thinking about people's quality of life and ensuring that remains high. So for each of the strategies that you discuss, you would need to evaluate how successful they have been. You could either discuss the positives and negatives of 2 strategies, or you could discuss 3 different strategies and just state whether you think it was a success or not. As always, with these questions, with our AO3 marks, we have to consider success in terms of our social, environmental or economic impacts. So socially, have these strategies helped to improve the quality of life of people living in London? Environmentally, have these strategies helped to reduce carbon emissions or waste? And then economically, have these strategies helped to generate more money? So what you need to be thinking about for each strategy is whether or not it has been it has led to social benefits, environmental benefits, or economic benefits. Remembering that sustainability, true sustainability, incorporates all three of those aspects. It will meet the needs of people, it will help the environment, and it will also create money. So the most successful strategies will be ones that have done all three. So think about that when you're answering this question. Remembering always that when we have a question about an urban area in the United Kingdom, it will always be London. So here I have just summarised some of these strategies. This isn't all of the strategies we've discussed. This was from the table. If you remember, you completed a table about sustainability in London a few weeks ago. So I've just summarised some of these strategies. So I've looked at the congestion charge, I've looked at Beddington Zero Energy Development, which was BEDZ. I've looked at flexible hours and working from home, affordable housing in Stratford, and then first steps. You do not have to talk about all of these. You probably want to pick out 3, and then you're going to conclude with whether or not you think strategies have been successful or not. So you might want to talk about the energy efficient housing. So looking at BEDZ and saying how fantastic they are in terms of the environmental impacts they are having. So homes in the Beddington Zero Energy Development Housing Association, they use 81% less energy for heating. They use 45% less electricity than other homes, and they have 48% less water use than other homes. These all show that that is a really sustainable and environmentally friendly approach to living in London. It's also not having any negative impacts on people's quality of life either. However, it is London's only project. So the benefit of this is very, very small. It's a small scale impact because there is only one of them in the whole of London. So when you're talking about the success, think about, okay, it's been successful, it's good for the environment, it's good for the people living there, but maybe the fact that it's such small scale actually impacts its successfulness. So read through these, what makes them successful, what makes them not successful, and then remembering always to conclude at the end. So the second question I would like you to have a go at is this: assess the reasons for re-urbanisation that are taking place in a major UK city. Remembering that our UK city will always be London in a question like this. So once again, if we bug it, we know it's an assess question. And what does that mean? It means that you are going to need to, in an assess question, explain 4 reasons for re-urbanisation in London, and then you're going to need to assess the significance of each one of these reasons, stating which reason has been the most important for encouraging people to move back into the city. So the reasons, that's straightforward. For re-urbanisation, so I want you to answer this because I think some of you will be sitting there thinking, what on earth is re-urbanisation? So re-urbanisation is the flow of people that are moving back into the city, and that's been taking place in London since about 1991. Remembering that London experienced lots of urbanisation, then it experienced counter-urbanisation when the London docks closed, and now it's since 1991 been experiencing re-urbanisation with people coming back into the city. So this is all really important, and you need to understand why this has happened in London, especially East London. So in this answer, you're going to need to explain 4 reasons for re-urbanisation and state which one of these 4 have been most responsible for this flow of people back into the city. So this is something that you did as your homework booklet, and it was set just before Christmas, and it was in your homework booklet for over the Christmas holidays. So some of you again might be thinking, oh, I don't remember it, I don't remember doing it, I didn't understand it when we did do it. So what I've done is, again, I've summarised on the next slide these 4 reasons. So just a reminder that we are going to be focused on London. So why are people coming back into London? The first thing that we can talk about is something called gentrification. So this is the idea that many high income earners now prefer to live closer to work than commute in. This has meant that many former working class areas in inner London, such as Bermondsey, but also places like Shoreditch, have become gentrified. It means these areas are now occupied and renewed by middle classes enjoying the lifestyle London offers. Gentrification is a really good example would be Shoreditch, where now you can get a 1-bed apartment in Shoreditch, but you'll be possibly spending up to £1 million on that 1-bed apartment. Now, for local people, that is going to be potentially out of their price range. It's definitely out of mine, but high earners who live in the city, who work in the city or Canary Wharf, can now afford to live in these areas, and they prefer to live there so they can work and live in the same areas. So that's one reason. So people are thinking, okay, well, I work in the city, I want to live in the city too. So more and more people are moving into the city for that reason. The other one is investment. We know that this is a huge, huge thing. So big, large TNCs have now created jobs in the financial and business services in London Docklands, especially in Canary Wharf. We have over 100,000 people now working in the Canary Wharf region, and big TNCs like HSBC have their global headquarters there. This means that there are more jobs, once again bringing in more people to the area, bringing people back into the area not only to work but also to live. So this has led to re-urbanization on quite a large scale. The third reason is something called studentification, and this is the idea that we have some really big universities in London, Queen Mary in East London in particular, and these universities are growing and growing. They're growing, and that might have been caused by demand from overseas students as well. And there are parts of London now where students live in large numbers. So where areas maybe weren't as populated after the closure of the docks in the 1980s, so people started moving out of London in the 1980s, actually what we're seeing is more and more people coming into London for universities and to study. So that has not only brought more employment, so it becomes this multiplier effect, bringing more jobs, so more people come for the jobs as well as just studying, and then students spending more money in those areas too. So it really tends to regenerate an area the more students that are living there. And then finally, space. Space would be the fourth reason you talk about. So the closure of London's docks in the 1980s created a lot of space for redevelopment and regeneration. Now there have been lots and lots of new houses and offices being developed on these brownfield sites. So a brownfield site is just an area that's been built on before, all around the Docklands. So old industrial buildings have been turned into new flats and housing and offices, once again bringing in more people to the city. So just want to recap that re-urbanization is this flow of people back into a city that has in the past experienced people moving out of it. And the reason people moved out of London in the first place was because those industries that created so many jobs up until the 1980s, they closed down, and so people moved out with them. But since 1991, more and more people have been coming back into London again, and that is what re-urbanisation is. So I hope that that has helped you. I look forward to receiving these 2 8 markers from all of you in my class, but make sure that everyone is submitting these to your own class teacher. Really hope you have a really restful half term. Well done again for working so hard. We know it's difficult, we know it's challenging, and we really, really hope we see you again soon.